Welcome to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast, where my guests share their stories of addiction, how they recovered, and the tools and practices they use to stay sober now. Well, Heather, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about talking with you.
I know we're going to have so much fun, and I'm looking forward to being on your podcast too. And I love the alliteration of, well, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's either for sober chicks or for sober chicks, depending on how you want to say it.
Yes, exactly. And that's where we started. There were four of us in the beginning, and it was the number four and also four women. We really, really, when we started, felt the need to change the conversation about recovery, to start to have conversations, and to really, really focus on trying to do our part in ending the stigma. Because ultimately, in our experience, the people that I have loved dearly and lost, isolation and secrecy and shame, that's what's killing people, you know?
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
it's not going out or having a relapse, it's not coming back because
Yeah.
you have, so much shame. So, it was very important to all of us that because each of us have our own kind of story and our reason for having a passion, um, for working with women and specifically in recovery and our own recoveries, of course. But um, it was very important to us to, yeah, give voice and really show. The second year was really showing what amazing things people, women specifically, were doing in recovery. Like, these women, if you go catch our season 2, like, they are just kicking ass and taking names, and, like,
Yeah.
I love
Saving
that, like,
souls.
saving souls, right? So, we have this idea. I am definitely had subscribed to this, where we have one term, it's alcoholic. It looks one way. It's usually associated with unhoused, uncleanly, unstable. And that idea is a very useful tool to distance yourself. Oh, I
Mm.
don't have a problem because I don't look like that. Um, and it's also a misnomer that we have to get to that point to even say, this isn't working for me. This isn't like, I don't like the way that it makes me feel. We need to start having conversations about the roles that alcohol play in our society and having other options and just normalizing it and ultimately making it fun.
There it
No
is.
one wants to do this if it is not fun.
Yeah, I think it's so funny because a lot of people are like, oh, I'm gonna have to give up the fun. And I was like, what is fun about waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with full of anxiety, because of all the chemical reactions that alcohol creates in your body, not the least of which is raising your baseline of cortisol when you're not drinking, right? So when you're not drinking, you feel more stressed out. You don't know why. But like waking up with hangovers, not performing well at work, not being present for your kids, I mean, listen, I could go on and on. It's like, what is the
Yeah,
fun about that? You have an hour or two of what you would consider fun, and then you don't even remember the rest of the evening, and then all the drama that ensues. So
yeah.
what is so fun
It's an
about that?
illusion. It's an illusion. But
Yeah,
I think it's what you tapped on. I might not have something to relieve my stress.
yeah,
How am I gonna
yeah,
cope?
yeah,
So it stopped being about fun, and it started being at one point about, how am I gonna get through the day?
yeah.
How am I gonna deal with life on life's terms? Because I wasn't dealing with life or whatever. So, for me, it was an undiagnosed neurodivergence that I firmly believe was present at childhood and is ADHD, but because I've had so much trauma in my life, it's hard to determine the chicken or the egg. And
Right.
in the end, it doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
I mean, it does in terms
No,
of how my process and how I choose to treat my neurodivergence, but the strategies, the things that I need to do, the coming to terms with it, the celebrating myself, the seeing it of a superpower, the shame that I carried for my life,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I didn't understand why things just didn't work the same for me, or I thought I was lazy a lot. Actually, this is a really funny realization I had recently.
Yeah.
I did a master's of science in my field of art therapy, and I didn't read my textbooks. And I was so mortified and so shameful. I wanted no
Oh.
one to know the secret. I like tried just to hide all that. I couldn't process the material
Mm.
reading it that way. I couldn't. I was having other conversations in my head. My neurodivergent brain didn't learn that way. And so I needed to do other things. I never equated that I was working harder. I was working um innately, just to try to get the information, because no, I didn't know that that's what I was doing. I
Mm.
just was trying to survive. Um
Yeah. The
and
survival
so
skills.
yeah, the masking, the hyper perfectionism, the hyper achievement, um yeah, all of those things were incredible survival skills for me, and they
Yeah.
also brought me to my knees so many times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I want to kind of get into the origin story of like what were the specific traumas, because I think when we get really specific, it helps people to relate. And it's so interesting because we present all with different scenarios and different things, but it doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside. The feelings are always the same on the inside. But before we jump into that, I do like to play this little game called the lightning round, which is
Okay.
I say this every time. My listeners might be so sick of hearing me say this, but it's fun. It's fun for me. Okay, so when you first got sober, it was like 7 or 8 years ago. Is that right?
A little
Yeah,
over 7, yep.
a little over 7. So when you first got sober, were there any books that really helped you in the beginning?
The Big Book.
Yes, the big Alcoholics Anonymous book. It's so good.
Yeah, and the NA book, the
And A,
NA
okay.
text. So, because I went to treatment, I had options. I went to treatment in Thailand. I was gonna be going back to,
Were
mainland
you
China.
living in the US and you went to Thailand for treatment?
No, I was living in
Oh, okay.
China when I
Oh my
got
goodness.
had to go into treatment. And so I went to a place in Thailand, and, they had an alcohol treatment program, and then they had a trauma-based program. So I did 30 days in the substance treatment side of it, and that wasn't necessarily 12-step focused, but we did go to 12-step meetings. It was all around their own curriculum, that
Okay.
related to shame and denial, and a lot of the elements of addiction and so forth. And then I did the trauma portion of it. And that was a big key for me, because I had done therapy for years and years and years, but being without substances and doing trauma work together was that beginning of the healing for me. Um, and so what was the question you originally asked me? So the
Oh, the book.
books
Yeah.
that were available. So I'm in Thailand. I can't access these texts in China.
They don't
And
have them
so
available in China?
mm-mm, not in
Okay.
English. No, and
Oh,
not, I mean, no, not
no.
available.
Okay.
So I brought every text that I could get back with me from Thailand. So I got the full AA text, I got the full NA set of texts because I had access to them.
Hmm.
And I love what NA said about, I don't have control over my thoughts and feelings. Like, that's what I struggle with, right? Is the control over your thoughts and feelings. That resonated with me.
There it is.
That idea of, like you said, it doesn't matter the story or all of those things. It's really the thoughts and the feelings that it's, I will use food, relationships, work, at one point alcohol. I will use whatever to avoid. It does not matter. So,
I feel like
recovery.
all addiction could be boiled down to avoidance.
Yeah,
Avoidance
yeah,
of things that we can't manage, the feelings.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So what's your other question? So that was the first
Okay,
one.
okay, so those are great. This is why I love this because it's so interesting what arises. But yeah, it's the thoughts and feelings that we are can't, and I think we're avoiding it because we haven't been able to solve it. Right? Because if we
Right.
would have been able to solve it, then, or manage it, or cope in some way, then we wouldn't need these other coping strategies that are so destructive.
Mhm.
So, yeah, those are very fundamental books. Do you have a self-care practice? It could be a morning or weekly. What does that look like for you?
Art.
Ah, of
I
course.
have to make, well, yes, you would think
The art
I'm the
therapist does
worst.
art.
Yeah, I'm the worst at making sure that I
What?
do art. Yeah, yeah, because we do it professionally,
Yeah.
and so to sit down and do it yourself, um, it's one of the things that most professionals in my field talk about how to do. And then I have ADHD. I have a neurodivergent brain. And so I
Same.
have learned these amazing tricks. Like I need to have like something fun. So I do challenges. Right now I'm doing a 100-day collage challenge. I'm a little bit behind because life is just crazy. But if I have the challenge, I'll create the artwork
Love it.
and it has an end date. So I always say to my clients and anybody I work with, have it be time limited, have it be fun, and have a reward. And so 100 days is time limited, or 100 collages is time limited. Um, it's fun because it's engaging and I'm learning new things. So I'm trying different things. So it's experimental, which is fun for me. And then the reward is that when you're done, to look back and see how, that's such a nice, cool reward. Rewards aren't like buying things or, sometimes they are, but it's that reflective process. That's the reward. That's what you get.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's art.
Yeah.
Um, and I do use quite a bit of bilateral music
Okay.
when I make art, when I work, because I've found that's the only way I can stay on task.
Isn't that something? So I'm super ADHD too. And when I'm doing stuff, I like to make soap. That's like my artistic outlet. And I always have to have something on the TV, but it has to be something that I've seen a bazillion times. So it's usually either Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Dune. My
Right.
family is like, oh, there she goes.
Yeah, because you have to be able to just completely absorb it. So
Yeah.
what I've heard that described as is these different levels of meaning of distraction.
Yeah.
So if I need to be fully focused, I need like complete quiet. I need to like
We need
be,
quiet.
if I need 50% focus, then I need sound. I need something, but I have to have something familiar with because I can integrate it.
Yeah.
So it distracts those extra parts of programs that are running. And
Right.
that's why I can focus. So what
Yeah.
you're saying makes total sense. And that's why I do the
The
bilateral
binaural
music.
beats. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
because I use the
those.
same one every time.
Okay, yeah. So your brain is familiar. It
Mhm.
it it offers a sense of security and comfort. And yeah, it's very like to someone like us. Yeah, it's very relaxing.
And the fact that it's bilateral, it helps with the brain processing. So
Okay,
with trauma, with ADHD, with those kinds of things, that's the part that we struggle with is the integration.
got it.
Um,
Okay,
so it helps
learned
with
something
that.
new.
Yeah.
That's good. I love that. Do you do prayer and meditation, stuff like that?
I do. So my meditation is art,
Okay,
is the
yeah.
bilateral. I do pray. I do have a spiritual connection.
Nice.
Very much so. Yeah.
what kind of spiritual beliefs were you raised with?
None.
Oh, so you had a clean slate
Yeah, in theory. So
in
my
theory.
mom was a hippie.
Nice.
And so she was like, you can choose for yourself. And so I had great experiences. We had friends that were Mormon. We had friends that were Jewish. We had friends that whose father was a Russian Orthodox minister in a church in Toronto. Um, I had the opportunity to experience a lot of different religions and different churches and different things like that. And then my parents died.
Mm.
My dad when I was 13 and my mom when I was 15.
Oh my God,
And
so young, so close
yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah.
13 and 15, those are like the formative years.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Holy shit.
My adolescence was stolen.
How did they
Um,
pass away?
so my dad died of AIDS.
Oh,
He came out officially,
holy shit.
I guess when I was like 5 or 6.
So, okay, so at 5 or 6, you like kind of didn't know any different anyway. Like,
No, yeah, they got divorced, but I guess my dad was I think, well, now I recently found his journal.
oh,
Um, and rereading it, and I also connected with his best friend, his childhood best friend, and he really like filled in so many things. I always thought my dad came out, had an affair with a man, it led to their divorce, and then he moved out and lived his life as an uncloseted gay man for the first time in the, you know, early 80s. So that just equals at that time death.
wow.
Um, Well, I now have read I have 3 poems. One when he first met my mom, one when I think he asked her to marry him, and one when it's about me. She's pregnant with me. And in there's things about she has to let me be who I am, and she says she will. And so I think maybe he was bisexual. I found out from his best friend that they all used to go to gay bars together in they would lived in Berkeley, California. So
Oh, they had access to San Francisco.
yeah, exactly. That's where my dad actually passed. That's where he's scattered underneath the Golden Gate Bridge.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's kind of how, where I started. So I lost my dad at 13 to AIDS. I didn't know at the time. Um, and that's a different story. Because
And your mom? Oh,
my
sorry, go
mom, yeah.
finish your thought.
Um,
Sorry.
I wasn't good at keeping things to myself. And I had told my friends that my father was gay and they stopped talking to me. Because remember, this is the time when people thought just like
Oh,
having a gay parent was like, so
super
when,
stigma.
yeah, so when my mom found out he was dying of AIDS, she didn't tell me that. She told me he had cancer because she knew that I would not be able to like keep that to myself. So fast forward, my mom's a brilliant woman. She's a nurse. She's done all kinds of crazy, like amazing things. She was a NICU nurse.
Mm.
She was a life flight nurse in
Wow.
Utah, dealing with neonatal care. She could go really anywhere and work. And this is a woman who had my brother at 15, had to drop out of school, had to get her GED. My grandparents raised my brother because my mom was not
She was a
stable.
child.
She was a child. She wasn't stable. And so I came around 10 years after my brother. My grandparents were already raising my brother. And so they wouldn't take me. Um, and so I just kind of was left with my mom, who was an amazing woman. So, but also was really, really unwell, and on a lot of mental health issues. And so she, I guess, really tried to work through the grief of losing my dad. And she started a home healthcare company with a couple other people taking care of AIDS patients in the home.
Mm,
Again, this is in the 90s. No one is doing this. People think you can get it from toilet seats.
mm.
And she falls in love with a man, one of the patients, and he's dying, and she moves him into her home. And she cared for him for the last year of his life, which ended up being the last year of her life. And 7 days after he passed, she ended her life.
Oh,
So
oh,
she at
I'm
some
so
point planned it.
sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's 30 plus years ago. It is so tragic and so awful. And my mom was this incredibly dynamic woman who probably had ADHD
Mhm.
and couldn't harness it and didn't know how to get help, right? This is a story of so many. Um,
Didn't know how to get help because we
mhm.
weren't talking about it then.
No, it was a stigma.
Yeah.
It
Which
was
is
a
why
sig
we do what we do, right?
right. Yeah,
This is the reason.
yeah, yeah. So, um, I think for so many years I was so, of course, angry and
Yeah.
um just all the things. I
Yeah.
felt relief
Mm.
because my mom was such an unhealthy person. My life up until when she passed, I had moved 16 times. There were endless, we had lived all over, like there were endless men in or out of our lives. I had been physically and sexually abused. Like the trauma I experienced wasn't her intention. She never, she just was so broken. She didn't see that the people that she was bringing around her were also broken.
Water seeks its own level.
Right, exactly, exactly. We
Yeah.
all know this when I go through my own journey and through recovery and you look at the people that you surround yourself and you're like, okay, so through treatment and through years and through having my own children and through doing my own work, I see that these two people were just so incredibly broken, just trying to like love each other. I always knew I was loved. I didn't know that I actually don't, I wasn't wanted. I know that. My mom
And you
told
weren't
me,
safe. Not
my
safe.
mom told me that I was not safe. Um, I
Oh,
actually
your
just
mom
did
told you that you were unwanted?
so I just recently did this really incredible journey this past weekend where I
This
went
past
back to
weekend?
Pittsburgh. Yeah, I went back to Pittsburgh, which I haven't been there like this in 26 years since I left. This was my journey
Whoa.
back. It
Okay.
was for an art therapy conference. I haven't been to one in 19 years. So the first one that was available to me since coming back was in my
Wow.
hometown. It's very much
The stars are aligning for your healing.
100%. So I went to Pittsburgh. I got to see my professor, who that woman gave me the most incredible education. You know, what I've learned is that my mom couldn't care for me, but what she did was she found these amazing women and plugged them into our lives.
Wow.
So I have these women through my entire life who have supported my mom or stepped in to help my mom or done something like that that have formed who I am. And I continue to find those women, and
Yeah.
so my professor was one of those women, and she gave me 5 years of her education, and she gave me, amazing opportunities. And, um, art therapy directly came from losing my mom. I went to a therapist. She heard, oh, you love art. Oh, you like to help people. Oh, you've been through this. Have you heard of art therapy? There was one there was four undergrad programs at this time. This one was in my town.
Wow.
So I went. And at that time you don't have to do that. You don't have to do an undergrad, but I wanted to make sure this was something I loved before I committed to a master's. Man alive, like it's how my brain thinks. It was everything. And so because of the program that she gave me, I needed to go to a better program for graduate school. I had to go to an MS program, which is, did it without reading, did research, did all of this stuff. Um, But
Can I just tell you a little story as a side note?
yes.
Us ADHD people are so creative that when we want to figure something out, we can. And I did 2 years of nursing prerequisites, and I didn't want to take chemistry. And I found out that you could take a test and they called it, you can place out of it. So I went online and learned as much as I could about chemistry, and I put everything into like therapy terms like covalent bonds or two negative bonds bond together or co and I was like, oh, that's like codependent, two negative bonds. That's like codependent. And I used all these little tricks and I placed out of chemistry because I was like, I'm not
I
taking
don't
that
want to do it.
class. I'm
I
not
don't want to
taking
do it.
it. Yeah.
I
So
know.
I just placed out.
I know. I have such like it's funny how our brains are like, nope, I'm not doing that.
I'm not doing
I
that.
am not doing that. I'm going to
No,
figure out
ma'am.
9 ways. Nope,
No, thank
not
you.
loading. Oh, thank you.
And then
It's
you know what
so
I
true.
did? I spent 10 years I'm from Silicon Valley, and I'm a sales girl, so I did 10 years of tech sales, and my brain does not like it. And I tried to cram that shit in there, and I just did not like it. But it was interesting but I had the desire for the money, so I found my motivation to sort of cram it in there. But it was almost as if as soon as I left that particular job or whatever, it all like fell out of my brain
Yeah.
instantly. My brain's
Yeah.
like, nope, rejected.
Nope. Don't need it anymore.
No, thank you.
I know. Excuse me. It's so interesting how that works. And I have to go and take a test now to because I'm back in the US and for my license.
Oh, yeah.
Worst, it's my worst nightmare.
Oh, jeez.
It's all the stuff that I didn't read, right? So I found out someone created a graphic novel for art therapy. Of course, an art therapist did this. Of course. So it's
Wow.
a graphic novel, and that's how I'm going to reteach myself so I can take this
Okay.
test.
Yeah.
Um, because it's just a thing for me. It's
Man,
just a
it just makes me feel like, we just have to find our own path. I was just listening to Elizabeth
yeah.
Gilbert interview, and um she was on my show, but I was listening to her. She was talking to Marie Forleo, and she was talking about how we have to just find our own path. And I'm watching my son struggle through organic chemistry, and he's an
Mm.
artist, right? And he is
Why is he taking
tore
organic chem?
because he wants to be a fish and game warden. Like he
Mm.
wants to be in the forest. So they make him take this so he's a biology major and they're
Okay.
forcing him to take organic chemistry, but it's like a filter class. And it is killing him. And I'm like, my husband and I are we grew up with so much trauma. It's like we've tried to force ourselves in these roles that we think we're supposed to be. Like I thought I was supposed to be an account executive in Silicon Valley selling technicals, security software. Oh my God.
That sounds super fun,
Oh my
sexy.
God, it was torture. I tortured myself for 10 years and I'm like, I
Uh,
do not want to see my son torture himself. So I'm like, let's get creative. Let's find another way around this thing. It's like if this isn't what's that saying that if a fish judges itself on its ability to climb a tree, it'll think it's an idiot or do you know what
I have never heard that, but I think I need to look that
probably
up and
because
I
it's
will
not
definitely get it
right.
wrong. But I'll get it wrong because I always get those things wrong.
Yeah, but the essence isn't when we
Yeah.
judge ourselves when we're trying to accomplish something that's not meant for us, we feel like failures. And that seems to be this reoccurring theme.
Yeah.
And like, we don't want that for our kids. And I forgot what my original point was, but I think it's so interesting that us as creative people, we have to find our own path and tune into our guidance and follow the joy of what we're naturally inclined for. Not necessarily what we want to do, but sometimes like what we're good at, the thing that brings us joy. It's so interesting to try to break out of these limiting belief systems that are not even ours. They're like put upon us from society. And then we
Mhm.
judge ourselves because we can't rise to some kind of standard. And it's like, how do we break out of the matrix and you know, get really in touch with what we were meant to do that isn't
Yeah.
tied to money or performance or achievement. That's hard.
It's really hard because a lot of those things that are ingrained sound like our own voices, and
Hmm.
so it's very hard to determine what do I really want and what do I really need, and what do I think I need, kind of. And I've had this experience coming back to the US and starting a business here, um, being welcomed as an art therapist, which hasn't happened in a few years. I had to fight really hard, in the Middle East to be able to practice, and getting distracted, thinking that I, wanted to do things in a certain way, and, because that's the shoulds, right? And then really getting quiet with, okay, what do I really want and what do I need? I have, we came back to the US because our youngest is in the midst of a medical crisis.
Oh
Um,
no, what
yeah.
happened?
They were diagnosed with POTS, um, but it went undiagnosed for a couple years. And
What is
so there's a
POTS?
POTS is a posterior, okay, Possit I'm not gonna say the first phrase. Basically, what happens is when they lay down and then they stand back up, the blood does not return to their
Oh,
heart in the way that it's supposed to. So it affects a lot of really tall people,
oh,
um, and some people pass out.
right.
My child does not, but there's a lot of pain associated with it, and it's because um, the blood doesn't return, your heart rate goes up and it stays elevated. And
Hmm.
so individuals with POTS, when they're standing, they're basically like running.
Wow.
So all day, your your heart rate. And so we thought they were having panic attacks, but they were cardiac events, and
Got it.
so it's a whole
It's
big layered thing.
physiological, not emotional
Well, it
or
eventually
psychological.
became emotional. It eventually
It
became
it
psychological.
creates emotional issues. Is that fair?
I think when you have no control over what's happening with your body, that you
Yeah.
keep trying things and it's not getting better, there's
Oh,
hopelessness. I mean, there's a
yeah.
lot.
There's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that could
So
be, yeah. That must be so hard as a parent. I'm sorry y'all are going through that.
thank you. It's by the grace of recovery, I can deal with hard things now.
Yeah.
And I
Oh, we
can
should probably get
be,
back to recovery.
yeah, I can be the mom that my kid needs. I can be
Yeah.
the mom that I want to be, that I and show
Yeah.
up. Um,
Could you imagine
yeah,
if you were still drinking?
no.
Brutal. Brutal.
I,
We need to be sober to be prepared for life's unexpected events.
yeah. I mean, I think about how when I was in, full active use, how I just was surviving. I just was
Yeah.
trying to get through the day. And if you're just surviving, you have no capacity for anybody else.
Right.
Right
Uh,
now we're surviving, but it's because I have a ton of capacity and we can handle something really big.
yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you, so at 15 your mother passes away. Who do you go live with?
So originally I go live with my brother, who's 10 years older than me,
Oh,
who
wow.
has four kids under 12. That's
So you're like a built-in babysitter.
what it felt like. I
Yeah.
mean,
God bless
they're,
them.
yeah. So they were very, very much involved with their church. And at this point, I do not believe in organized religion. I don't seek religion in that way. I don't seek organized religion specifically. And so they really didn't know how to help me. And so they put me in church youth group and ministerial counseling because that was what, worked for them. And it wasn't enough. My mom's business partner took custody of me. That was a huge blow up in my family, created a lot more trauma.
Was
And
that
so
because you wanted like you weren't fitting in with your brother's family, so you asked to be assisted by somebody else?
Yes, there was a lot of, my grandparents did not trust my mom's business partner,
Oh.
and
Was your
so I
business, with that, was that a person, a male or a female?
female
Oh, okay.
woman.
And they didn't trust her to take care of you?
No. No, they didn't. There was a lot of, oh man, it's so complicated. There was a lot of very complicated things that
Okay.
were not nothing to do with me. I will say, that just like in my own recovery, when I stepped back, I saw that I had surrounded myself with very unhealthy people.
Mm.
My mother did as well.
Right.
So, she gave me a home, a family, really helped me, get stable, and for that, I am so incredibly grateful. There was a point where things fell apart, and,
Partner, your mom's partner?
my mom's, yeah, yeah, and
Okay.
so I don't have a relationship with them anymore.
Or do you have a relationship with your brother
I do.
and
I
his
do, and
family?
all his kids, yeah, yeah,
Nice.
and all their kids, yeah,
Wow.
they're my niece and nephews are
They're parents
huge.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and my brother and I are the oldest in the family, which is super weird.
Oh,
Um,
right.
yeah, because we're it.
You're the, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, I'm 49, you're 59, and we're the like matriarch and the patriarch of the
Girl,
family.
that is weird.
It's
Yeah.
so weird. It's so weird. Um, so I see my husband has a great family. Um, I have friends' family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, those people that my mom put into our lives, that was a constant. I have people in my life, friendships that I've had for 30 plus years and just solid, incredible people in my life. So
Yeah.
that I'm very fortunate.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
Um, Let me. You and I are so much alike. I feel like we're the same person. So I feel like we've been meandering a little bit, but I kind of
All
want
right.
to zero in on. So you've had a lot of trauma, right? Like you and I both have a history. Like I'm sure ours are different, but I also had sexual trauma when I was a child, and it really establishes an identity in you, in me, in us, people who go through that. It's a very particular kind of identity and low self-esteem, low self-worth, and then we overcompensate with achievement and blah, blah, blah. It's exhausting.
Mhm.
Um, but we start like to survive those years, like when you were talking about 13, 15, man, those are, I needed drugs and alcohol to survive. Like I think without those drugs and alcohols, I don't know that I would have survived. Well, let's walk through a little bit of your, like, let's call it your using journey, and what happened that you decided that you needed to get into rehab or treatment in Thailand.
So it's interesting that you say 13 to 15, you needed drugs and alcohol. So that's when I started experimenting with alcohol. So that last year of my mom's life,
Same.
she just partied and did her own thing. And I
Wow.
just didn't have parents. It was fantastic.
Wow, you're so
So
young.
yeah, but at 15, you're like, or 14, 15, you're like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's
and
good.
then, one of the people that my mom moved into our house is 19 and she, she's getting us alcohol. She was like a big sister to hang out with. Um, so friends are around. We're drinking. We cleared out my mother's liquor cabinet. Oh my
On the
gosh, it's
regular.
like, yes, like Canadian whiskey. Ooh.
Ugh.
Um, and then she died.
Mm.
And I realized that addiction was a part of her story, and I saw it and I understood how much that took her out, and I stopped drinking at that point. So I actually was sober for the first time at 15, 16,
Wow.
16. And I didn't drink at all, and like actually like drug friends out of frat parties and like just tried to help people. I was the recovery.
Rescuing.
Yeah, for sure. Um, 15, 16, like that was my MO. And then college, freshman year, a little bit. I started to, but things were very controlled. I wasn't allowed to live at college because I had had a very severe eating disorder that came about in high school because that's how I
In
dealt.
high
I didn't
school.
wasn't
Yeah.
drinking. I was dealing with my mom's loss, and so for me, the food and actually not eating and
Was it
having control.
anorexia?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, that's brutal.
So that way I could control.
Right.
And then if I did eat, it was they called it bulimorexic is what it's called. So when you
Because
do,
you're
you don't eat, but when you do, you vomit.
got it.
So um so yeah, so I go to college, alcohol, and so ooh man, I don't know how my girlfriends and I made it. I don't know what universal plane was taking care of us because we were idiots. Um, we were in downtown Pittsburgh, like we were just knuckleheads. Um, and it came time to graduate from college. I was not ready for that transition. I'd been sexually assaulted a couple times again, through that whole process. And my eating disorder went crazy, as well as my alcohol use. And so I was hospitalized my senior year of college in an eating disorder unit. And so when I came out of there, I had a fifth year and I worked full time and I spread it out and I, tried to get myself together. Um, and then I left. And that was 26 years ago. That's I graduated and all these magical things. Like I applied to one graduate school. I looked at the thing, it was past the date. I called them up. They said, "Oh, we've extended the date to today." I wrote
Oh,
my entire
what?
graduate school application while taking care of 2.5-year-olds at recess and submitted it and got into graduate school. Like it was
That
meant
was
that
meant to
was
be.
the trajectory. Yeah. So I moved to Norfolk, Virginia. I met my husband the first week of graduate school. We've been together ever since. That's
Oh wow.
25, 20 years ago. Um, and life was good and stable for a really long time. Finished graduate school. There were different things that came up. Um,
Because life gets lifey.
Life gets lifey. Moved to South Carolina. Um, my husband was in the military. 9/11
Oh,
happened.
that explains the moving around. I was going to ask
Yeah.
you about that.
Well, the first part was my mom. The second part
Well,
was,
right.
yes, marrying a
Oh, isn't
sailor.
that interesting? I see a correlation between moving a lot growing up and then you sort of recreate that in your adulthood.
100%, 100%. So now, fast forward, we're about to have kids. We
Yeah.
want to live in the same area. We want to raise our kids. It's so idyllic, like we're in New Jersey and we're going to raise our kids. We're going to walk to the elementary school. And I think Jacob, my son, was in first grade, and James, who was born Jules, um, was in preschool. And I was like, I want to bang my head off of a wall
Because raising little kids is hard.
hard. And I'm so bored. And so at some point I go back to work. I just didn't have the stimulation I needed,
I
right?
know, I know. Do you know what I
So
did when my kids were little? Is I opened a daycare. I was bored
yeah,
out of my
I
mind, yeah.
started I ran a mom's club that was
Oh,
a
okay.
nonprofit, and we did charity work, and then
Of course.
of course, and I was introduced to a domestic violence agency. This is where my research is. This is,
Oh.
and they have an expressive arts therapy program. And so when they needed an art therapist, they approached me.
Okay, because you had
This
already
is,
gone to school for that.
oh, yes, I'm already an art therapist. I'm working with this organization as a volunteer. They know of me. The program was amazing. And I stepped right into an activating PTSD scenario, working for 2 years with children who are survivors of domestic violence. I thought I had things under, yeah, I thought I didn't see it coming.
Right.
So that combination of like having my own children and having my own stuff kind of coming up, my own parenting things, my own stuff.
Yeah.
Now I'm in a domestic violence agency and these kids are telling my story
Oh my
over
God.
and over again. Um and because of the laws, they might still have visitation with these people, or like there's a lot of very complicated things that are
Yeah.
involved in working with individuals in domestic violence, and we did an amazing program. And I stopped being able to sleep, and
Oh
I started to
no.
have panic attacks, and I just couldn't function. And so I don't remember the exact timeline. If I put my resignation in and we had a kid that was murdered, or if
Oh
there was a
no.
child murdered, and then I put my notice in one of our safe houses, one a kid that was killed while on visitation. And that's my worst nightmare, right? And I have my own kids,
Yeah.
so I can't separate. I can't, like, my nervous system's on fire. I am always on alert. I can't keep things to. So I put my resignation in, and we get hit by Hurricane Sandy, and I'm in Jersey. So my mother's name was Sandy, by the
What?
way. Yes.
Come on.
Yeah,
This is like literally the perfect storm.
it is. So Hurricane Sandy comes in.
Whoa.
My husband's operating the nuclear power plant. While this is happening, we have to take our children and our pets, and we have to, you know, evacuate. We have to separate as a family because he has to do his job. There's no calling out, you know.
Oh,
Um,
in nuclear power plants, you can't just.
no, he's working. They're like, bring an air mattress. We don't know when you're going home. That's literally what.
Right. Yeah.
So we evacuate. And when you go through something like that, it changes your perspective. And I was already antsy and I was already unfulfilled by what was around us.
Right.
And so we got headhunted for a job in China. And so, perfect storm. I'm fully activated in a full PTSD state. I'm drinking a ton. My therapist has suggested maybe we look at some kind of treatment. We get hit by a hurricane. I'm going to quit my job. That'll fix everything. We get headhunted for China. That'll change everything. And off we go.
Did that send you into total isolation in China? Because when you move, it's hard enough, but when you move to a place that has a different language, I would imagine that's even more isolating.
Yes and no. So we were on a compound, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
there were other families that were there, and I had spoke to a lot of those women and everything, and so I knew them. But when I got there, a lot of them left and went into the city. And so we went from having a whole bunch of people to not having a lot of people on site. And so I
Yeah.
homeschooled. And
Oh,
the other thing that's happening is there's a bar called Yumway, the way to global yummies. And that's where everybody speaks English, all the regular foods. They've figured out how to cook some great things that are familiar to home. They bring in, like, have a little store in there. It's Cheers. It's Chinese
and everybody
Cheers.
knows your name.
And everybody knows your name because we all live on this site.
And it's all centered around alcohol, it sounds like.
Yeah, you don't drive.
Yeah.
You're away from home. What makes people feel better? Alcohol.
Yeah.
It's a big family.
Yeah.
And so, and also in Asia, drinking is a huge part of the biggest business culture. It's a huge part of the
Yeah.
culture, social culture. Um,
As it is here
as it is here, 100%. And so
to drink.
the the relief that drinking gives, actually, the relief, the pressure of living overseas, the pressure of losing the support systems you don't realize are so important because
Right.
you don't even notice how much they're holding you up.
Right.
You
You
think
think I'm
things
good?
are,
I got this.
yeah, you think things are going to be one way. You
Hmm.
can't communicate your 12-hour difference. So your communication with people stops. Plus, China and Google don't play well together. So we had no FaceTime. We had no any of that. Um, and so pressure's applied. And alcohol becomes a very big part of our lives. And we eventually move into the city. And in the city, it's like the kids go to school and we have, you know, fun.
You have all
Um,
day.
you have all day. And so it all kind of starts to accelerate. And then
How did you know that the drinking was a problem? How did you come to the, you're like, this has to stop. I need to go to treatment for 2 months.
I was sexually assaulted in a bar
Oh no.
that I put myself in that situation. I did not, I am not, I am not responsible for the sexual assault, but I am responsible for being around this person, being heavily intoxicated. I had no business being there by myself, like just all the things that had started to happen because drinking was my only escape.
Thank
Um,
you for saying that. That's a very balanced perspective, right? It's an acknowledgement.
mhm.
You're not responsible, like you didn't deserve it. Also, acknowledging that, you put yourself in that situation, but that's not victim blaming at all.
No, I had high risk taking behaviors because
Right.
I was intoxicated, because I was really, really suicidal but didn't know it.
Oh shit. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I was so actively against suicide because of losing my mom that I was so, so suicidal and I didn't even recognize it.
It's totally dissociated. There's a
Mhm.
lot of that in addiction. So much
Yeah, you don't realize
dissociation.
the risk that you're taking,
Yeah. But the
you know?
need to find relief and distract is so great.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
things I did in China, it's stupid. I'm a highly intelligent, critically thinking woman, and
Yeah.
it didn't matter.
It didn't
I have
matter.
amazing children, amazing friends, amazing husband. It didn't matter. I
No.
was so uncomfortable with who I was, and I
Yeah.
had been told my whole life I didn't matter. So
Unresolved
when I
trauma.
started to have people that really I mattered to and mattered a lot to me, that was the hardest thing to deal with,
Amazing. Yeah.
right?
It's
That's the
crazy how
reactive
that works.
attachment.
Yeah. And that's so after that, that's when you went to Thailand.
Yeah.
You
So,
did a solid 30 days and then you mentioned trauma therapy after that. That was consecutive. Did you have to go home? Were you able to go home to do that or you had to stay in Thailand?
yeah. So I stayed the whole time. I was there for 10 weeks.
Wow.
So my higher power moved a woman above me who was in the program, who had years
Ah,
of sobriety.
a 12-step
Sh
program?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
She and I, at one point, lived a block from each other in Pittsburgh. I worked at the restaurant that she used to get drunk at. So she's now living
Wow.
above me
In China.
and in China,
Okay.
and she relapses. And so she goes to treatment in Thailand. And when she came back, she talked to me about treatment in a way that I could be open to, because I was really used to like inpatient psych. And
Hmm.
I knew I didn't belong in that type of environment because, again, I had uneducated myself on purpose so that I could have one image of what this looked like. So I'm not that bad. I'm not that bad. I don't need that, like.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when she came back and said, this is what it looks like, it has art therapy and Reiki and trauma therapy and, mindfulness and yoga and trauma based stuff and addiction based stuff. And um, it's in this nurturing environment. I could see that. And so that's where I went and that's where it began for me. Um, I needed the education and the break from alcohol.
Yeah, and
and
your
to
environment,
really
I would
and
imagine.
my environment, yeah. Which that's a tough thing because treatment for some people, it's good and bad. I
Hmm.
needed that break. I needed that reset. I needed all that. But then I also had to go live my life again in that same place. And what I got and set up, which I didn't know I was going to need so much, was I had a recovery coach that worked with me for a year along with my therapist. We moved to the United Arab Emirates during that time. So I was able to connect with the local 12 step and then found a couple other people in my community because I still live 2 hours outside of the main cities. And so we started our own 12 step meeting, with these great, amazing men. And then this woman that I was telling you about, she moved from China to the UAE. So she joined us. And so I had recovery in my town. And then I started to, COVID happen. And I wanted to go back to work and I wanted to help people. And telehealth happened. And so I was like, I need to go get some education. And that's kind of, so then I ended up doing a trauma informed expressive arts therapy certification, but also did recovery coaching and all of the coaching certification because that was the only way I could work in the Middle
Right.
East.
Yeah.
They didn't acknowledge my profession.
Mhm.
And so through doing all of that, my recovery is always first. And without that, I don't have anything else, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody, I had to build it into everything,
Yeah.
like everything. Otherwise, I don't know that would work.
Yeah. I love that we have, thank you for bringing up the coaching part. I do a lot of that myself, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to integrate all of the things. I think it's so important for people to be able to explore like trauma therapies, like EMDR, but also it's nice to have one person that can kind of coordinate all the things for you and kind of keep an eye out. Everyone is so different, and it's nice to have somebody that has experience that can sort of keep an eye out on all the things. It's a lot to manage.
It is, it is. And as a therapist, it's really evolved how I work. Um, I work with very complicated cases. I specialize in trauma, addiction, and ADHD. It's all about the same. And it's really about first stabilizing and helping the client stabilize themselves, right? And I use construction. It's about metaphors. And because of
I
my
know.
experience with
Foundation
Hurricane
first.
Sandy, yes, yeah. So I'm like, okay, first, you guys are flooded. We're going to drain the water
Ah,
because that's really what that happens at the beginning. We just have to drain the water and just be able to manage, like you said, the cortisol levels need to come down. We need to be able to process things on a sensory level. We need to be able to sleep consistently again. Eat,
yeah.
like there's so many things that just before you do anything else to prepare
Yeah.
your body for that work, right?
Yeah.
People that go in and do that trauma, like, oh, let's talk about your trauma day one. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. No one's ready
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, there's always a debate of what comes first, trauma therapy or sobriety. And in my mind, I was watching a Huberman Lab podcast where they were talking about neuroplasticity. It happens at night, and when you have disrupted sleep, you're actually not creating those new neuron connections. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. I was always taught that you need to get sober first, and it makes sense because when you're sober, then your body starts to like your body chemistry starts to go back to homeostasis and operate in a way that it's supposed to. And then once you're stabilized, then it's almost like, okay, now you're going back into the fire in a way because, but when you feel really safe, it feels like the trauma will naturally arise when you feel safe and supported to be processed to resolution. It's like a detoxing, a purging of all that stuff. But the sobriety has to come first from a multitude of perspectives.
The stability, to
Stability.
be able to, because the sobriety is just the beginning.
Just the beginning.
It's just the beginning, because when you take that substance away, it's really about finding the tools to regulate your nervous system, to find the tools to get calm so that you can go in and do that work. I
That circles
really
back
do
all the
not,
way.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt you, but that
yeah,
circles all the way back around to what you said in the beginning about managing your thoughts and feelings,
yeah, yeah.
allowing some
How do
feelings
we
to
expect
process to
people to do
resolution.
that? We're like, oh, you need to be abstinent or whatever. But you haven't, there's no,
No
where are your
tools.
tools?
Yeah.
Where are you, and how long have you practiced using those tools? Look, I can do a full renovation with a hammer. It's not going to be pretty. I can figure it
Or
out,
fast.
or fast, because I'm resourceful. But the idea is not to do that. The idea is to add more tools and other experts and to build out your repertoire. But the first
Yeah.
thing I have to do is I have to be able to pick up a hammer.
Yeah.
I have to be able to understand where the work starts. I
Yeah.
have to be able to just exist. How many of us just really struggle with boredom?
Oh, well, what's so interesting is boredom is actually a sign of physical healing. I learned that, did a bunch of, well, I didn't take the chemistry class, but I'm obsessed with like brain chemistry and
Yeah,
how
yeah.
the brain works. And what I learned is that when you flood your brain with so much dopamine and chemicals and stuff like that, the way that your brain protects itself is it removes the receptors from the cell walls so it can't absorb it, right? So it doesn't have as much receptors. And then when you remove the thing, the dopamine, whatever the drugs, alcohol, then that's what the boredom is because your brain hasn't had a chance to replace those receptors to receive the dopamine, serotonin, and all the other
Mhm,
things. And so that's the period. Boredom is actually the healing period, but it ends. Like so many times I hear people go, "Oh man, I'm sober and I'm so bored. I had so much more fun when I was," and I was like, "Yeah, your brain is healing. You just need a minute. Just
mhm,
give it a minute. This will pass." But
mhm.
this is actually a sign that it's working.
For sure. And it's also an opportunity to find other ways for healthy dopamine and to explore those things and to see for them to connect with what does work for them. Because, that's the part of the exploration
Yeah.
is learning what works for you. It's hearing your own voice. It's, you know, I thought I always worked against myself because I didn't trust what my brain was saying because it was so
Right.
different, right?
Lack of self-trust. Yeah.
Hmm.
That takes a
And
minute
then
to come
that's
back.
further compounded by my behaviors.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like things that come up, like um, just losing weight is such a trigger for me because it's always this dynamic of like when things get speeded up or whatever. It's so interesting. It's because I didn't trust myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It triggers that old response system. It's very
Hmm.
somatic. Your body keeps the score. Your body remembers.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it requires so much present awareness, like being in the present moment to recognize what's actually happening when your body's freaking out. You're retraining your body.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's amazing. Gosh, you've done so much work.
Hmm.
Listen, we're always a work in progress.
Right,
I was,
exactly. It's an onion.
it's an onion. That damn onion always makes
Onion.
you. I think they call it an onion because when you peel it, it makes your eyes water.
Yes, it makes you cry. It's
Makes me
awful,
cry.
but it's also like the
So
most
healing.
useful vegetable there is. It goes in everything.
It goes in everything. I like the metaphor though, but I like the also the metaphor of like t tears or pain leaving the body, right?
Oh yeah.
It's a purging, and so I often joke around that I make people cry for a living because I try to create a really safe space, and then the stuff arises naturally. Like your body and your brain knows what to do, and then it
Mhm.
releases, and then you let go. right? And so all the answers are within, and our jobs are
Yes.
just to facilitate, create a safe space, and the stuff comes up on its own. And
Mhm.
we bring
Go
in the
along the journey with them.
professionals. Yeah, bring in the professionals to do the trauma. I'm not a trauma therapist, but I know who they are.
Yeah. And that's the nice thing.
And
I do get to, I can kind of continue with my clients in that way,
yeah, that's
which
amazing.
is nice. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, create a safe container. I always tell people my goal is to be unemployed. And
Do
that
you know
is
what?
true. It's so true.
Do you know I tell people? I say fire me as soon as you can. I'm not here to try to
Hmm.
create dependency. It's like we
That's
get some
right.
skills, then you're just off and running and you do your thing and life is happy. The thing is that there is the other side. Like we talk about the problem a lot and what because that helps people identify. But the truth of the matter is there is the other side. And
Life's
then sobriety is
amazing.
just the beginning. Yeah. It's just like a
Yeah.
hurdle. You get over it. And then there's like this whole new world that opens up.
Yeah.
A whole new world. They don't need us forever. Just a little bit.
No.
We'll
And the
just
great part, I had someone talk about fear of missing out.
yeah.
And I do not fear missing out of parties or anything. What I do fear missing out, I fear missing my kids' graduations. I fear
Oof.
missing their weddings. I fear whatever that looks like for them. I fear missing out, on retirement with my husband. My parents missed everything. They missed my
Mm,
entire life.
man,
Um, that's what I'm afraid of missing out on.
that's
Um,
clear perspective.
yeah, the other stuff doesn't matter because guess what? When I went and got sober, nobody fucking called. Nobody wondered where I was. Nobody from the bar missed me. In fact, when I went and drank water, because of course I had to like try to go back and be like just totally normal. It's fine. I'm just gonna drink water and smoke cigarettes. Totally can be here. And they're like, "What's wrong with you? Like, are you pregnant? Oh, are you on really good drugs?" I'm like, "No, I'm just drinking water." I'm like,
Just wanted to come in and say hi and hang out. But yeah,
right,
when
but
you're not
nobody cares.
drinking. And plus they
Nobody
get
cares.
boring. You don't realize how boring they actually are.
Yeah,
Drunk people are very boring. They're stupid.
yeah, yeah. It's really. I have like a hard stop. I don't. If I don't have a reason for being there,
Yeah,
then I'm not.
yeah. Then you're not going to be there. Yeah, I think that's one of the hard things is when people get sober. It's like they need to find new friends a lot of times. Either relationships fall away or they deepen, but they don't stay stagnant.
No.
Because your sobriety is an affront to their drinking and their way of handling their emotions. So they don't want to look at it. So it's a crucible, you know. It's a quick way to sort people out, but it's to everybody's benefit, to be perfectly honest.
100%, 100%. I'd rather know that you are not in my corner.
For real, for real.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, listen, I could talk to you all day. This is amazing. Maybe you'll have to come
Oh,
back
it's
for
amazing.
round two. But where can people find you to do art therapy?
So you can find me at on my website, which is heatherzuchowski.com.
I'm going to
I'm
leave a link
also
because everyone's going to misspell your last name.
100%.
How do you
Also,
spell it though, real quick?
Z is in zebra, Uchowski.
Okay, not bad.
Not bad. Or on Instagram at Heather_art for life.
Art for life. It's so funny when we were talking about you doing art therapy and you're the worst, worst one at it or whatever. There's this idea that we teach what we need to learn. And there's no shame in that. Like, there's a reason that I am obsessed with teaching people about self-esteem and self-worth. It's because those are practices that I need as well. And by teaching it, it keeps me in it, right? All the practice, like the self-care practices and working with others and service and all the things. Yeah, it keeps us in it because this is a lifelong process. There is no arrival point. And thank God, because I love the discovery phase and the constant evolving and being able to share what we learn. It's so fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. And just being open to like looking at things in a different way. I say a lot,
Mm,
about having ADHD, and somebody was like, "Well, who gave you that label?" I was like, "Well, my psychiatrist, but me. I use the label because I'm reminding my body and my
yeah,
mind that I
yeah,
think differently
yeah.
because I thought I was wrong and broken.
Mm, mm,
And I also do it because someone else is going to hear me say it and they're going to connect with that and we're going to have a great conversation. And that happens all the time too.
yeah,
And the things that I learn or the things that tools that I use, I learn from these conversations. Everything
yeah.
in clear bottles, clear containers, everything in my house is in clear. Because if it's not, it doesn't exist. My art supplies
Interesting.
are all in clear bins.
Really?
Mhm. Game changer. Because I
Game
used to
changer.
overbuy things because if I
Do
didn't
you have a
see
hobby
it,
graveyard?
oh my God. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But because I'm an art therapist, I can use the supplies with my clients. So it's a very
Yes.
slippery slope.
Tax deduction.
Yes. Yes.
That's my favorite
Yes.
excuse for buying
Mm-hmm.
shit I don't need.
Yeah.
I can use this through work. It'll be a tax deduction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah.
listen, this has been so much fun. What a pleasure you
Yes.
are to
Yes.
chat with. I feel like I found a new friend. Yay!
Yay.
And I'll look forward to our conversation on your podcast too. And listen, thank you so
Yeah,
much
four
for the
sober chicks. That's right.
four
That's when
sober
I
chicks.
four sober
Yeah.
chicks. Yeah, number
Is
four
it,
sober
and
chicks.
it's the number four. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny when we go to name these things. Like I initially named my podcast ODAT chat, and then I realized that I was in my little sober bubble and I didn't realize that people outside of sobriety didn't know what ODAT was. And some people spell it with one A, some people spell it with two. So yeah, it's a clusterfuck, which is seems to be appropriate because we're all kind of messy.
Yeah. Yeah, we thought the number four, I mean,
It's
I was
brilliant.
hearing it, and so it all kind of naturally came, but we realized that number when we lost our first fourth, we had to replace her. And we lost the second fourth, and we were like, we're not doing this again. Like this is it was already a double play. So we're like, we're just
Yeah.
doing FOR. We're just because we don't want to be tied to that number because that's the other thing is we all needed to be in the interview
Yeah.
because we're four sober chicks, right? So
Yeah. It's all fun.
yes, it is. But thank you so much for this opportunity. It was super fun. Great conversation. And I look forward to ours next.
Yeah. Next time. All right. Well, listen, you have a great day. We'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.